But I do think like you are still saying it out loud. It's just like in casual conversation and you're, you know, taking those little pieces and writing them down, which is important. But it feels like a surprise because like I'll just mention something in casual conversation and maybe even forget I said it.
Right.
But then you wrote it down and then you remember. So it does feel like you're like reading my mind because it wasn't like I was like, I want a new purse, John. And then you show up with a new purse. It's like, oh, this purse is cute, but I'm not going to, you know, do that right now or something, you know, and then like months later, you might surprise me with it or something. And it still feels like a surprise though, because it was like a passing thought.
Exactly.
If that makes sense.
And it can be things that you never even said or like, it's like if you know a person really well, then you know what they would like, you know what I mean? And so you do those things without having to be asked. And then that is amazing, right? So
I mean, it just like, it can be bad when people start to think, oh, you should be reading my mind. And I don't want people to get that thought because that leads to a lot of problems actually. Like you can't read my mind. You don't know me as good as I thought you did. And then now you're in a whole different, you know, now you're further away from each other because now you're arguing rather than romance, you know, so.
You should attempt to be the mind reader, but you should never expect someone to read your mind, right? It's like, it's nice when someone knows you well enough to do it.
You should try because you care. Like you said, like you care. And I think too, that's like maybe men and obviously women too, you need to realize why you care so much about this person, why you married this person. Like, I think that is too also why you think about me is because you care so much about me. And you're like, I mean, it shows from what you just said of like, I want her to have this in this life. Like, when is she ever going to have it? That shows how much you care about me. And so I think if people focus on, I care about this person, I married this person, I have a family with this person. Like, why wouldn't I want to be romantic or like do certain things? And, you know, I'm not saying that you have to do things all the time or a certain amount of frequency, but like, and it doesn't even have to be a thing. Like for women, the thought is usually enough of the thoughtfulness. You know, because like you said in the beginning, like if you're just so flowers at her, candy, and then she's like, you know, these are really nice, but I don't feel, you know, loved by you. You're going to be like, well, what the hell? I got you flowers. I took you on a date. It's because it's not like the thought behind it. And a lot of times she wants to be closer to you or you're missing like the thoughtfulness of it.
Or if you've even got like, you know, even if a woman says, I wish you'd be more romantic, you're not very romantic. And then you're like, okay, you get flowers and then you light some candles and then and then you're like, okay. And then you know, you're expecting something from that. And then, you know, and then you're like, I did what you said. I was more romantic. And you've got that attitude where you're like, okay. Because the reason why a lot of times a woman's not reacting to the flowers and the candles or the dinner or whatever is because she suspects her intuition that you're just doing it to check the thing off the list to get her off your back. And then she's going to test you a little bit to see by not being like, oh, that's so romantic, because she's not convinced it's romantic yet. And then as soon as she puts any kind of resistance and you're like, I can never please you, you're never happy, then the gig is up, the jig is up. She knows what you're really about. You were just trying to appease her as opposed to actually being thoughtful. And that's where so when you're being romantic, you can never be like expectation that the other person's going to respond, that the woman's going to respond. You're doing it because you care about her, you love her, you want to show her a good time or, you know, give her an experience, not because you need that reaction from her. Because hey, if all of a sudden you're like, oh no, if it feels like you're checking off a list, just doing something that you're supposed to do, that's the same thing as like, it's anniversary or birthday, I better buy a gift and buy a card. Buying a gift and buying a card, it's good that you remembered, but that's not romantic because you're just doing the thing. Especially if it's a gift, it's like you get her something she already has, or something. You know, it's like
you didn't pay attention that she already had it.
So it's like you have to think. It's not just about the gift; it's about the thoughtful. You get her something that she would like, that she's talked about, something, or that
pay attention. Like during the other times, like you said, make a note, email yourself, have a note on your phone, like freaking write it down if you have to. Like pay attention throughout the like mundane times, And then you'll have plenty of ammunition, woman-wise, of what to get her. Like, women talk all the time about what they want. Like, we buy stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you'll have plenty of things. But I do want to say for women, you need to work with your man. Like, and maybe in the beginning, you do have to tell him some of the things that you like.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And don't automatically get mad at him.
Right.
Because he just, it's not that he just doesn't care. I mean, sometimes that is the case, but it's usually easier to tell when a man just doesn't care versus he doesn't know how to be romantic.
Right.
So, that is something that I feel like women should give a guy a little bit more grace. I'm not saying let him off the hook, but help him. Like,
give him some
help him in a loving way. If you're loving towards him while you're trying to help him do this thing, it'll bring you guys closer together. And he'll be more motivated to do the right thing, to start writing stuff down, to be more thoughtful.
Right.
Like, a lot of guys just don't get this unless they've learned it one way or another. Right. And they already kind of know, and now they're like better at it. It's like, something that they learned and they had to exercise the muscle to like keep the muscle, So I just wanted to say that because I think women, a lot of times they get really upset and they don't realize that men just genuinely don't know how to naturally be romantic. Yeah. And, it's normal for us because we're all about love and connectedness and feelings and emotions. But men don't necessarily know, specifically. And I do think they might be trying when they do the things that don't necessarily have thought. So you do have to see that, like the glimmer of them even going out
putting
and doing
forth
that.
Some kind of effort,
as a step in the right direction.
Right.
And praise that, give him a shit sandwich, tell him like, wow, that's really thoughtful that you got me these flowers. My favorite flowers are lilies, just so you know for next time. But it's still really thoughtful that you got me these flowers. Yeah. That's a shit sandwich right there.
Yeah.
You're hinting at, these are my favorite flowers. These flowers are beautiful, but these are my favorite flowers.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then that should make him more motivated to remember that. So then the next time, he gets you flowers, he'll get you your favorite flowers. So that sort of thing. Like, obviously, when someone just doesn't care and they're not really trying, and you need to have a different conversation.
Right.
But it is important as we get into this and as we get into the next, like women seducing men, that like where people are coming from. And
I'll say like, well, it's funny because in the book that we were reading, that Love and Respect one, there was an example where the guy always forgets the wife's anniversary, or their anniversary. And then this year he doesn't forget it, and
because
he gets her a card.
The 10-year or something.
He actually gets her a card, right? Every other year he's forgot it, and she opens up the card and it's the birthday card. and it's funny because on one hand you could be like, why is she being so like? He actually did remember this time, and he made an honest mistake. On the other hand, it wasn't romantic because he didn't read the card.
Right. He didn't even read the card that he picked up. So
he did the token thing he's supposed to do. When you check something off the list, you're not romantic. When you check something off the list, you're not seductive. You cannot check something off a list. You cannot do the thing in order to appease the person. It doesn't work. Or to get something.
Right.
It doesn't work. Transactional does not work.
You can use that as like, okay, like I said, I'll use the flowers thing again. You can use that like women like getting flowers, that concept.
Right.
But you have to put the thoughtfulness behind it.
Right.
She really likes lilies. They're her favorite one. I'm going to get lilies. Right. So that's using the concept.
Right.
But putting the thoughtfulness behind it.
Right.
Because I'm sure it's the same with the seduction, right? Like, this is a seducing thing. But how can I make this in a way that is like catered to what my husband likes, sort of thing? So it's always the thoughtfulness, like you said. Like, it's, you can use those things as like the grounds, like the groundwork for what you're doing.
Yeah.
But you have to put the thoughtfulness behind it. Otherwise, it's just checking off the list, like you said.
And women aren't off the hook. Like you said, it's they should help encourage the man, right? And even give him some tips. But also, you also be romantic, which we'll talk about in another episode. But I wanted to mention that here because you can't just expect a guy to be romantic and not do the equivalent. And we'll talk about another episode, but what's romantic to a man sex. It looks different than what's romantic to a woman. It does look more sexual usually, right? Because writing and it doesn't mean that a sappy letter or or things like that, but it still comes down to the thoughtfulness, which like I said, we'll talk about in another episode. But if you're not doing that, if you're not being thoughtful to the things that he likes, but then you're expecting him to be thoughtful for the things that you like.
Yeah, it's not a one-way street.
Yeah, it's not going to quite work out. But I will say this also, if a man isn't being romantic, if a woman figures out the man's language and starts to be romantic to him in the way that he likes, he's much more likely to be enthusiastic and to turn around. It doesn't mean that that's
And if
a
he's
guarantee.
not, then you need to have a serious talk.
Yeah, then dump him.
Better than